Good afternoon. Joseph Chiappalone's my name. I'm a GP from Stanthorpe. I'm a graduate of the University of Melbourne. I've got other degrees as well. I've been interested in this work since I was told in 1985, April the 14th to be exact, at a conference. You may or may not believe this, it's up to you. Anything I say is up for you to believe or reject, whichever way you feel. At a conference on a spacecraft outside of this dimension, that it's time to go down and tell them what's going on. So from that time, in 85, I gave up my medical practice. I started writing books. I've written about 32 books. I announced to the world through the media various things, and they did exactly what we thought they'd do. They laughed. So without a concern, I then did what I was supposed to do. I went around the world for the next 20 years contacting various contacts I had to make sure they got the message, make sure we linked up into a network, and make sure that the things that were to occur were beginning to occur. In the meantime, I did radio shows with Jeff Rentz. I've got a website you're welcome to look at. The addresses are behind me. And now we're at the stage where more than ever people are being stimulated to awaken, because you will all now agree that something massive and at sometimes something malicious is happening to this planet. And today I'm going to explain to you what it is and why that is. Now, some of you are going to get a bit confused with what I say. Some of you are going to be very shocked and startled. Perhaps you might even be a bit traumatised. I've seen people angered by my words or frustrated and fearful also. But some of the people, of course, are elated with what I have to say, and that depends on what sort of energy you are, what programming, pollution and indoctrination you've got in the cardboard box. It depends on who you are, basically, in spiritual terms. I'll come to this throughout the lecture. We're all confined in these bodies, which I call cardboard boxes. That's not us. There's something inside of us, the eternal consciousness that is really us. The boxes are things that are made of matter, they're born, they degenerate and die. And we recycle through a process, an evil process of reincarnation, because of the way this system is run. Now, it depends on who you are, therefore, on how you receive my words. What you know, because some of you don't know very much, some of you know a lot. It also depends on what you don't know, because there are a lot of gaps in that. And as I said, what sort of indoctrination? You've got to connect to the true you eventually, and I'll come across that. It also depends on how you react to what spiritual help you're being given. Some of you are far more connected than others, because there are many other levels that are helping us at this time. And also your state of spiritual viability is going to dictate how you respond to these words and by energy. What I mean by that is that some people are not going to survive spiritually the changes that we're going to undergo. I'll tell you from the onset, nothing of matter is going to survive. And that is a certainty, and spiritually only a percentage are going to survive. There's a lot of detail on my website about that, and I'll explain further as we get on to the lecture. Also, you've probably heard what's called the lower monkey mind, the mind that questions everything, plays around, always gives you trouble, confuses you and so on. You've got to bypass that to get an understanding of what we're talking about, and I'll explain all these things. Now, how did I get onto the spacecraft in 1985? I remember visiting the craft because that's my home. Me meaning the consciousness in this body, not the body. I remember visiting it from the age of 2. If you read any pediatrics, they say you can't remember things under 2, but I do. And as Paget's theory has been disproved, you can remember. And periodically I remember going to the craft. In my book, one of the books I wrote about my experiences, I write that when I started university, they said, look, we won't see you for a while. We'll come back in 20 years. In the mid-40s, late 30s rather, I started getting stimuli to awaken again, and then the call at the conference to come down and tell the world what's going on. You can believe this if you like, you can reject it, or you can do whatever you like with it. The fact is that some people have followed me for the last, since 1985, and they know from that time, from what I've written, that what I've said is accurate. Is that not so? So if you follow what I've said in that time, it's followed exactly that way. Since that time, many other people have taken an interest in this work, and they've coloured the water and also muddied it. So people are more confused at times. What I'm telling you is the absolute truth. Whether you want to believe it or not is entirely up to you. It's a very fleeting lecture. I'm going to give you minimal detail, of course. It's an introductory lecture. But you all know that something is wrong, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Something is terribly wrong. This place is deteriorating. It's fragmenting in every way. Physically, as I'll mention later, with all the chemtrails, the genetically modified food, the illnesses we've got, the sun decaying. Mentally, mental illness has never been at such a high rate. I don't know if you heard that report about a month ago on Australian National Radio, that 88% of adults are under some sort of mental treatment in Australia. 25% of people in America are on antidepressants. They're not coping. Something is breaking down, not only the body but also the mind. And spiritually, we are starting to see what's called demonic behaviour. And I'll get back to that in a moment because that's very important. Not only that, you'll notice that psychic abilities are improving. Whether you want to or not, you're starting to develop psychic ability. In other words, you're picking up more, your intuition is heightened, you're starting to become more aware of people you like and don't like. You're getting messages, you're having intuitive dreams, you're having things that are preparing you. You may have read that people are receiving messages through near-death experiences, through astral travel, through dreams and so on. That is because another level is preparing us for what is to happen here. And that's what I was told to do in 1985. Also, you'll find that the barriers, interdimensional barriers, are disintegrating. Quantum physics has it that there's at least 27 dimensions, subdimensions in the physical, and all of those are fracturing. So you'll be able to see the scarnates more easily, ghosts, apparitions, other things. You're able to intuitively communicate with other levels and dimensions. That's all on purpose because the whole thing is fragmenting. It's breaking down. And there's a very good reason why things are breaking down. People are starting to awaken to the fact that they've been manipulated by the media, by the ones in control, by the banks and so on. We'll come to more detail by that. And they're starting not only to awaken to that, but breaking that program. Is that not so? So we have people power. People are being resentful of how they've been treated. At the same time as that is happening, the ones in control are putting more controls by stifling their civil rights, by using microwave technology, by using HARP technology, by using the chemtrails to dumb people down and keep them under control because they realise the masses are going to eventually explode. And that's the explanation, of course, for FEMA and what it's doing to America with all their bases, with all their body bags, with all their concentration camps, and why the elite are building underground cities and so on. Not only to escape from the disasters that are coming, which they can't, by the way, but also to escape for the maddening masses. And you'll see advertised things like what guns to have, how much food to store, when to shoot people, what water you need and so on, because a time of anarchy is coming. And we'll go into that. The thing is, why do we want to awaken? We're awakening because we have to connect to our source. We've been cut off. And by awakening to what's going on, hopefully we'll connect and get the signal to prepare to leave. Because this earth is finished. I'll go further, of course. The whole physical universe is finished. Over 90% of it no longer exists. There's no way you can prove that, but you can tell from the fragmentation that's occurring on Earth, on other planets and our sun, and in black holes that are swallowing nebulae and other regions, galaxies and so on. You know that something dramatic and major is occurring in our neighbourhood of the system. You may want to believe what I say. There's no reason for me to lie about it, but I know that 90% of the universe does not exist. It's all been corrected. And now it's our turn to be corrected. This is what's going on. The other things you have to awaken to is to alien life. If we go back through history, the closest we can get to the beginning of human consciousness or art is about 17,000 years ago. In the caves of southern France, they found alien depictions on the walls. That is, primitive man was depicting aliens. We have other things like mention of them in the Bible, in the Sumerian literature, in the Vedas, which are part of the Hindu philosophy. Not only in the Bible, we have other people like in Mesoamerica, the Mayans, aliens. More recent time, we have the Dogons in Africa, who are a tribe near Mali, who actually describe being visited by aliens and being told that they came from a binary system, which is Sirius. And it was 1974 that scientists found out actually that Sirius is a binary star system. How did those natives know about that? Now, all generations, all people know about aliens. You'll find depicted in medieval art, there are UFOs, there are spacecraft, and they're space beings, and they're depicted quite clearly. So aliens have always been around us. I can tell you that over 100,000 races have visited Earth, alien races. It gets worse than that. They actually created these physical bodies we now occupy. They started off as an experiment, and we started off from bacterial, viral and fungal DNA to further to reptiles, insects and so on, until they got to this level of development. And this is now what the human body is, and it's evolving further. They're now attempting to put DNA strands into the human DNA in order to cater for changing conditions. I don't know if you've heard about that, but it's been cited. Now, this time is very important, and people are awakening, agitated, because there's a convergence of ancient prophecies that talk about the end time. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. The most classical in Western society is the Bible. But we also have this other one, the Mayan calendar, long calendar, supposed to end in 2012. And is that telling us that something dramatic is happening? It's not going to occur exactly in December 2012, don't worry. But you have things like the I Ching predicting the end time, end phase, and the Hopi Indians. So everywhere you look, there's a concentration of a reminder from different cultures and different eras that something very specific is happening at this time. And that's why I was told in '85 to go down and let them know what's going on. So that gives you a good idea. Now, why things like this? We have to know exactly why things are like this, and I'm going to get to it. Ultimately, you'll know whether I'm correct or not by what happens. As the old saying is, the proof is in the pudding. Is that right? So really, some of you know that this is accurate because you'll know what's resonating within you, or you will as soon as you bypass the out-of-mind programming. But others of you will know that it's accurate just as the last few days do come. I'm not here to argue about this. I mean, I'm just here to tell you things and awaken, and you can do what you like with this material. But it's to prepare you for unprecedented changes that are occurring on the planet. And in '85 we couldn't see them, but now we're starting to see them because everyone is talking about them. Now I'm going to divide the lecture into 5 segments, basically. First of all, I'm going to describe where we're at in this world. It's certainly not a benign, benevolent, loving, harmonious world, is it? It's far worse than that, and it's getting worse every day. Secondly, we need to ask who you are. You're not the cardboard boxes that I'm looking at. You're not the person described by the labels of the box. Black or white, male or female, rich or poor, and so on. The degree of education and where you live, and they are labels of the box, and those labels will disappear when the box dies. What is you is inside that, and that has lived for a long, long time, in general terms. Now, some of that consciousness inside, I'll come back to it in a moment, is viable, it will continue. Some of it is not viable, it's going to finish. for very good reasons. The third segment is going to be a little bit on who am I? Why have I got this message? Why have I got this information? Why am I distributing this particular energy? Then we're going to discuss how we got into this mess, how this whole thing evolved. And that's going to be an explanation of what's called a celestial error. And we'll also, as we go along, discuss why there's so much pain and suffering or exploitation and misery in this world. Not just for us, but also for the animals and for the vegetable kingdom and so on. Everyone suffers, everyone gets exploited, no matter how happy you think you are at times. That happiness is an illusion. But why there's so much pain, suffering and misery, we'll have to come to that. In other words, we're going to find out what's going on. Now, if you don't quite understand this as we go along, at some stage you will. In the discussion I heard earlier, we're saying that more and more people are coming out with exposure of things. And they have to now because they can't control the masses any longer. They're being forced to reveal things they kept hidden. But if you look at the general world and the history of the world, you can describe it as a world of cultivated ignorance. They've done this on purpose. Who are they? They are the archons. What are archons? Archons are the controllers of the world. They are a class 5 demonic entities, consciousness created by the creator of this world, which Plato called the demiurge. It is not a divine being, it's not a loving being, it is a demon. So to say that some of the religions agree with this, that the ruler, creator and ruler of this world is a demon, right? And we have references to that in various ancient manuscripts, particularly the ancient Gnostic system doctrine that I'm talking about here. If you've heard about the Gnostics, they were the people that were classified as heretics by the Christian churches, particularly the Catholic Church. They weren't heretics at all. Gnosticism is something that true beings, certain beings have inside them. It's a knowledge they know, and they know that this world has been created by a demon. And they occurred in every aspect of culture, in all parts of the world. And they're not just pre-Christian or Christian, para-Christian people that wanted to argue. Gnosticism is something you have inside you if you're a certain type of being. Now, whenever they spoke up, the ones in control, particularly the ones in control of religions, destroyed them as much as they could, men, women and children, because they didn't want this secret exposed, that the ruler of the world, Jehovah, Yaldabaoth, Yahweh, whatever you want to call it, is actually an archdemon. And the archons are his sons and daughters who have controlled this dimension since the inception of what's called the celestial era. I'll come back to that because that will make a lot of sense as to why we are the way we are. So as we go along, this is a world of cultivated ignorance. On purpose, they made sure we didn't know a lot of things. Who are we? We are the people trapped here and ones created by this evil system to work as servants. So we have to know in this cultivated difference what the meaning of life is. Everyone asks about the meaning of life because it seems meaningless. It seems pointless. You're young, you grow up, you get an education, you get married, you have kids, you start to degenerate, you get ill, and you die. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You've got no opportunity to do anything. As soon as you start to make sense of anything, you die off. So in the way this is, there's no meaning to life. But there is a meaning as we explore the esoteric version. We have to know about these aliens and UFOs because some of them are our brothers and sisters who are going to take us away from here. Not from just Earth, not from just this dimension, but to another dimension. They are from another dimension. So already you can see I can classify UFOs and aliens as goodies and baddies. Some of them are part of this evil system, and they are the ones that do all the problematic things around the world. You've probably heard of that they abduct people, cause experiments, get girls pregnant, take the fetuses because they're doing hybrids, kidnapping people and using them for food, altering other things, causing hybrids like chupacabras in Mesoamerica, and so on. These are the nasty beings. They cause a lot of problems, even if they play around with crop circles and so on. There are benign beings at the same time who come in special plasma crafts that have been seen, and these are the ones waiting to rescue the ones that are to be rescued. As well as that, we're going to have to explain why there's so much exploitation of energy. Now, you all sense that you are being exploited in one way or another, by individuals, by systems, by other things, by frustration that occurs in your life. Why should that be so? I mean, if this is a godly system, which it's not, you should have every chance to be nice and happy with your own energy and fulfilled. But that's not the truth of it at all. Now, going back to UFOs, if you remember when they first started coming en masse in the 50s, the US government set up certain projects to debunk what people are seeing. In other words, trying to call them crazy. And you have projects like Blue Book and others. Now, a classical example was Professor Hynek, who was employed by the government at that time to boo-hoo anything that was true. Later, when he retired from the government, he wrote a book and he admitted that that they were purposely doing that to stop people knowing the truth about aliens. Colonel Corso was another one. He was in charge of an area where the little aliens from Roswell were. And he wrote a book the day after Roswell. And he said on Italian television, I want to tell the people before I die that it was true. There were UFOs, there were aliens, we did operate on them, we did autopsies and so on. And of course, as soon as he wrote his book, the government called him a liar. He died in the 90s, I think it was. And then only recently they've admitted that he was telling the truth. So there's been a conspiracy against us all this time to keep us ignorant. In fact, the best way to describe how we've been is we've been mushrooms. We've been kept as mushrooms, held in the dark and fed BS, right? So we have to understand why that happens. Now, the other one's history is wrong because it's written always by the victors to obfuscate things. Religions are, as I've mentioned in my books and also on my website, traps for the individual to stop them thinking. They're not pathways to God or divinity or spirituality at all. They are pathways to block you, if anything, by feeding you BS. The first thing that religions demand is that you stop thinking. Is that not so? So you have to stop thinking and accept what they say. That immediately places you in their hands. Then they can do whatever they like with you. And what they do is not very nice. So that's religions. And the third one is science. Now, science seems to be very benevolent, but if you look at what science has done, it's helping destroy the planet, particularly with this technology and pollution. I'll come back to that. It's science that's created HAARP, it's science that created the chemtrails, it's science that gave us the genetically modified foods, it's science that gave us the pollution and so on. So, but also science negates reality, because most of the science today say near-death experiences aren't real, even though doctors now say it is real. They say there's no life after death, even though we know there is life after death. They say there's no reincarnation, even though as a clinical hypnotherapist I can hypnotise people back into their past lives. And they are accurate. And there's a lot of medical history and psychological history and psychiatric history that these things are real. So now the biggest trick that this evil demon that controls this place is the denial of evil. Now, if you can deny evil, then you've got no reason to complain about anything, and you'll have to accept the lot. And that's been his biggest card played on this planet, that people deny the existence of evil. And this is where New Agers get into a lot of trouble. And it's because of evil and the destruction of evil that we are in this phase where the world is going to be totally eradicated. Not only this world, but the whole physical dimension. And that's the message I was told to bring down in 1985. Now, all the writings basically are to put you off balance. The Gnostic doctrine has been hidden away, but luckily things like the Nag Hammadi library were discovered in 1945, the Essene Gospels were found in 47, and they give us a window of opportunity to see the truth of things. They are things that were against, the religions tried to bury and they failed. So where do I get my knowledge from? I brought it down from where I come from. I didn't have to read anything. I didn't know anything about this until it was time to awaken and put pen to paper. And that happened in 1985. So some of you know this stuff. You know it's right because it's within you. It resonates within you. And it's called the nous, the Gnostic knowledge that's within beings. I'll describe those in a moment. Now, I'll give you a few more examples of the cultivated ignorance that we're living with. The age of the pyramids is one. If you go to any geological department of the university and ask the professor, how old are the pyramids? Oh, they'll say, between 2,500 and 3,000 years. Well, that's bull dust. If you read Fingerprints of the Gods by a bloke called Hancock, you'll find that there are physical markings that show that the pyramids are at least 25,000 years old. The origin of man. We have evidence that there were super races before we came onto the scene, of humans that is, that had nuclear weapons, that had batteries, electricity and other stuff, plus from Atlantis, but that is more difficult to prove. But those other ones are easy. There's stories about flying machines and nuclear weapons in the Hindu Puranas and the Vedas and so on. They've found batteries that work in Mesopotamia that are thousands of years old. And many of us recall other times when we were as consciousness, in these bodies and other bodies long before this last 7,000 years that they marked down. So you have cultivated ignorance, like a lot of religious people believe that the earth is 4,000 something years old, because an idiot called Bishop Ussher worked it out from the Bible that it's only 4,000 years old. And I think it started on the night preceding the 29th of October and so on, 4009. These are ridiculous stories, but that's the cultivated ignorance we're dealing with. The other one is the Bible is the Word of God. If you read the Bible at all, you'll find that it's composed of bits and pieces of stories, history, things they've stolen from the Sumerians, the Akkadians, Gilgamesh, and all sorts of things. Now, there are hundreds of Gospels, and they eventually compiled them at the Council of Nicaea into 4. The Nag Hammadi Library and the Essene books expose that to show that this is not the Word of God, but the word of a culmination of idiots to control people. And that's all it is. And there are many errors in it. But also within it are bits and pieces of Gnostic truth, which I'll come back to. Well, you know how stupid the cultivated ignorance is. Like Christopher Columbus, hey, don't go, Chris, you'll fall off the end of the planet, because everyone knows that it's flat. And of course, the Greeks, 1,500 years before that, 2,000 years before that, had actually worked out the circumference from the rays, the angle of a rays of the sun, 500 metres apart, 500 kilometres apart. You see, everyone knew. Then there was a map around that time in the 14th century, a Captain Peary. They had a map from a satellite photo of the Earth showing Antarctica before, well, they didn't know about Antarctica, before it glazed over. So you see, history, as we read it, is bull dust. These things go against that. Then, of course, there's that there's no life outside of Earth. We are the only ones. And, of course, they house arrested Galileo, didn't they, for daring to say that the Earth revolved around the sun, and Copernicus said a few other things, when in actual fact, we know that there's evidence that there's life outside, because a lot of us have seen UFOs, a lot of us have interacted with aliens, and a lot of us have been outside of this dimension, me included. There's a chap called Drake in one of the universities, I don't know if he's still a professor, he worked out what's called the Drake equation. Have you ever heard of it? That's an equation of multiple factors that allow for the probability of life outside of Earth. Do you know what the answer is? Life is a certainty out there, so it can't possibly be negated. So these are the things to show that we're living in a world of cultivated ignorance. So imagine in 1985, I come out with my message. What do you think the newspapers and television did? They called me all sort of pejorative terms, thinking I was absolute nut. Let's go, detract for a moment, let's go sideways. In one of my books I mentioned that before I awoke, that I sent a patient who had contact with aliens to a psychiatrist, and she was locked up, unfortunately. Now, even today, if you mention aliens or UFOs and things like that to a medical doctor, they will send you to a psychiatrist and say you're mentally ill. They'll first look for a brain tumour, of course, with an MRI, and then possibly lock you up. Now, who's the idiot in this situation? It's certainly not the patient, because he's telling what the truth is. It's the masters, the doctors and professors of cultivated ignorance. They're the idiots. So the stupid ones are actually controlling the planet. But this is all going to change now. Everything has got to come out into the open. And it will. And these fools who are purposely there to block all knowledge are going to be exposed for what they are. And the ones that rule the planet are the archons. They know the reality, but they try and suppress it so people won't know. Now, the other thing you have to start imagining is that happiness, I've mentioned it already, is an illusion in this place. You have bouts of emotional happiness for a very short time to make you suffer the rest of the time, to allow you to tolerate the rest of the time. But there's no real thing as happiness on this level, because no matter what makes you happy, it will eventually disintegrate and go. You think about that. Your good looks. Okay, you may be a beautiful 20-year-old blonde. Now go to the nursing home and look at that same girl as an 85-year-old. Decrepit, incompetent, incontinent, demented and so on. Where has the beauty gone? Beauty on this level is an illusion. Even a brilliant mind, by the time they get demented, you'd rather that they died before they got to that level. It's horrible. The beauty of children, the beauty of something you built, everything disintegrates and fragments on this level. Beauty is an illusion. I wrote an essay called, a poem called La Dolce Vita. You'll find it on my website, where I go through every stage of whatever we call beautiful and see how nasty it is. Take, for example, a beautiful summer's day. How long can you stay in the sun before you get burnt? How long before the insects get you? And so on and so forth. And later on, your melanoma, your squamous cell cancers and so on. It's not a benevolent sun. It's not a beautiful day at all. It's filled with danger, but we think it's an illusion of beauty and happiness. Well, it's not, because we're made to think that way. Now, also the promises by the controlling archons are illusionary too. Do this and you'll go to heaven. Don't do this and you'll go to hell. And so on. That's how they control people, by fear. If we only knew the truth, we'd tell them to go jump in the lake and live our own life, because we are connected to our own God. They are there to prevent you. When Mesmer, you've all heard about Mesmer, who started hypnosis and animal magnetism and all. When he first started this with healing, everyone was very excited. Shortly afterwards, the Catholic Church thought, hey, people are starting to think for themselves. They're starting to connect to other levels of dimensions through hypnosis. We can't have that. We'll lose control. So they banned him. And the Americans have done the same with UFOs and with other things, because they can't control people. So it's all about evil control. So what's happening here? What's going on? Believe it or not, even though there's fragmentation all around us, we are following a well-executed plan to correct this abomination, this evil. Every step is known. Every day something is happening that's been planned for. You have to know the keys to understand what this, and I'll explain them too. You have to know all about good and evil and that celestial error I mentioned. So what is the plan? Basically, in a nutshell, the good side, let's call it the good side, who is far bigger than this whole universe, has seen this melanoma. Let's call this universe a melanoma growing on the skin, and said, we can't have that. It's got to go. So the only way they devised that it had to go was to rescue the beings that are in there, trapped in there, and then cut off the energy so that the whole thing would collapse on itself. Have you heard of entropy? That's the second law of thermodynamics. If in a system you can't put in more energy, eventually it collapses on itself. This is what is happening here. So as this energy, the good energy that constrains everything and supports everything, is removed, what is left? The bad energy, the demonic energy, the evil energy. So these of a demonic essence are activated far more than ever before, and they're coming to the fore unhindered. They're not controlled in any way to do what they like. And that's why the world is developing into a demonic phase. There's more dishonesty, there's more cheating, there's more crime, there's more ungodliness, and there's more demonism. All you have to do is look at the movies they're producing now. They're catering to demons, and the pornography, the explosion of pornography and so on. Now that's one thing. They're starting to realise that there's no holding them back, so they're going to do what they like. And one of the things they're going to do what they like is the perennial wars, the terror, which will eventually destroy the whole planet. We'll just talk about Earth for the moment. The second thing they do this is by making people suffer, they get energy out of them. Now, you may not be aware of this, but whenever you use your emotions, good or bad, what do you feel? You feel drained. Particularly, the higher the emotions, the more drained you feel afterwards, because you've lost energy inside. And until you replenish that energy, you're going to feel tired. And they can use that energy. I'm going to give you an analogy now. Any of you seen that movie Matrix? That was created by the Wachowski brothers after they read a Gnostic comic in Japan. And in that movie you had people that were like batteries. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And they supplied the energy to run that illicit system, which was underneath another dimension that had to be eventually destroyed. This is exactly what we're talking about. This is the Gnosticism. When this era occurred, special ones with a special energy, special beings made by God, not by the era, had the energy that this evil system needed. So since that time, it's been exploiting these people to get their energy out. And the more they can get the energy, the more they can run the place. But the consequences are that the more energy they take out, the more they destroy those beings. Just to short circuit a little bit to something I'm going to mention further on. If they take enough energy out of a human, for example, a human is a consciousness with 7 centres of consciousness. If they take enough energy, that human wastes enough energy through the programming, pollution and indoctrination of the evil system, it may not be able to afford to carry a human body next time it reincarnates. So it comes back as an animal. And most of the time they're allowed to come back as domesticated animals, like cats and dogs, horses, cattle, sheep near us. How often have you read or heard saying, oh, this dog is human, this cat is human? It could be your grandmother, it could be, a kid you lost, it could be your auntie. Now that's a truism. Eventually you're all going to get the psychic ability to see them in there. That's just a by the way, that's what that energy does. We'll discuss this a bit more when I discuss the metaphysical anatomy of humans. Now, you've all come, everyone on the planet is going to be awoken to what's going on. I mentioned before, some of them are reading ancient prophecy. The Mayans did us a great turn by telling us that the calendar is ending long term. Now, it was a higher consciousness that created those calendars. I mean, those people were savages and morons. They used to celebrate Sunday by going to the next tribe and killing them, stealing their kids and then slaughtering them on the altar. They were idiots. It's the consciousness all the time. It's like the Titans in Greece, Zeus and his plethora of gods and so on. It's always the higher consciousness in every culture that gives us the advancement, and they stimulate it. But of course, as soon as you get that knowledge, it's diluted and, of course, obfuscated to make nonsense. The knowledge comes down through beings called avatars. Avatars are sons of God. It's actually an emanation of the highest supreme that comes through onto this level and is needed to feed and sustain the people who are to be rescued. And we've known avatars throughout history, and I'll mention some of them now. You have Zoroaster. Have you heard of him? The fiery Gnostic prophet of Mesopotamia. You have Buddha. You've heard of Buddha, who later reincarnated as Jesus, Muhammad, Manichaeus, King Arthur, and so on. These are all the same aspects, divine aspects, that actually holographic projections of the supreme consciousness, and they do two things. They stabilise the planet, as Rama and Krishna said they did, and also give energy to those beings that are waiting to be rescued. Now, I've got to tell you a little secret. The majority of theomorphs, the trapped, God-created beings, the majority were rescued in November 1999. And since that time, the place has got worse because the energy source for the demonic realm has been depleted. Now, since 1999, what we have is myself, and I'm a leader of the rescue mission, and about 5,000 workers that I've got around the planet. That's what I spent 20 years contacting. I went around just about every part of the world contacting these things. I remember one day going to a plane in Tibet and sitting down and waiting for 3 hours for a little shepherd boy to come along. And as soon as I saw him, I knew that's who I was waiting for. And we made contact and then moved on. So we have this network that is supplying a special energy to sustain the others that are rescued. Who are the others? Well, I can tell you now, 70% of the people on the planet, we took away the consciousness of a billion of them in 1999. 70% of the people you see out there are robotic consciousness. They are robots. They are nothing. There's nothing there. They're artificial consciousness. But a percentage of them were made before the complete closure, and they have some divine energy in them. And a proportion of those have awoken to the light. In other words, they've been able to live an orderly life, a non-evil life, a life in true love, and they've been designated as capable to continue. They're the ones we're rescuing. There are also many what I call true beings in the animal world. We finished the animal world last year. We almost finished the vegetable world last summer. We're nearly finished that, and then the mineral world. So we're almost finished the selection to take them away. And it's the consciousness we take away. Every vegetable unit has got one consciousness, one circle, one unit of centre of consciousness. Have you heard that term? 7 chakras. Have you heard of chakras? They are units of consciousness. They are what are created by God to be aware. They're the consciousness. Any vegetable entity has 2. Animals have 5. Humans have 7. Angels and devas have 28 and more. And then you go to the galactic consciousness, which has billions, and then the whole universal consciousness. That's in the true system. So those that are designated as viable are being prepared for evacuation. The other 30% of the population are the demonic race. They are made out of dark matter. I don't mean the astronomical dark matter that was discovered in the 90s, which I wrote about in the 80s, by the way, before any of the scientists knew, but the dark matter in ontological terms. They are truly demons. They are the ones running the planet, and they are the ones conducting the wars and making hell for us. They come from hell. And their percentage is increasing because they're stealing the bodies and possessing people who are taking drugs and getting into all sorts of heavy pornography and that sort of thing, right? Their percentage is going up, and the world is catering to them. They are now allowed to run loose and self-destruct. So that's where we're at the moment. You have these 5,000 warriors that are assisting me to help rescue these other percentages. And I'm the main source for what's called the new green energy that's sustaining anyone that is still liable on the planet. I've never revealed that before today. So that's where we're at. So you're going to ask me, how long is it going to take to end all this? I was told that I would be the last one on the planet. I'll be shutting the door from the inside, I hope, of the spacecraft, and then it's gone. Now, I'm not sure how long this shell will last. I guess if we look at statistics for Australia, the average male lives 78.8 years. I'm almost 70, it could be 8 years, but I might live a bit longer. I gave Jeff Renz one date a while back on a show. A lot of my shows are on that, by the way, if you want to listen to them. And I thought around 2029. Since that time, I've modified it, and I'm thinking 2023. That leaves us about 11 years. Now, one of the things you have to destroy is the fear of death. the fear of the physical shell. You shouldn't have any of that fear because we've died thousands upon thousands of times. We've had, due to this idiotic process of reincarnation. If there's time, I'll come into as to why we reincarnate. So anyway, what's going to happen is once we are out of here, it's time to get out of here, we will either step out of the bodies, which die off, or we'll be sucked up into the craft, and then in the holding pen, as it were, the bodies will just dissolve and we will continue to where we have to go. Now, some people have asked me stupid questions like, why do you need a UFO? I say, well, why do you need a car to go from somewhere or other? If you depend on yourself, right, you can only walk 10 miles, 20 miles, and then you'll be exhausted. But if you take a car, you can go 500 miles. Now, these are crafts that go into interdimensional space, so you need those and their energy to travel those massive distances. Also, then I'll talk about timing, because this is important. The Earth, the universe is about between 14.5 to 16.5 billion years old, according to isotope decay that the scientists say. That's a hell of a long time to have this error going, is that not so? So now, why has it taken this long? If you understand time dilution, you realise that on the highest levels, it can only be a few seconds that this correction has been taking place. Any of you meditate? Have you ever noticed if you meditate, you think it's a very short time that you've been meditating, and then you wake up and it's an hour and a half gone? There you've experienced time dilution. The higher levels you go to, the slower time is. In other words, very little time passes, but it's faster here, on this level. If you have nightmares where your consciousness goes down to demonic levels, it seems that you've spent a hell of a long time being chased by demons or trying to shoot you or drown you or sharks eat you or so on. And when you wake up, it's only a few seconds. Now, this has practical implications. How many of you have noted that time is sped up?
Yeah.
Yes, a lot. Why? Because we are falling further and further into demonic dimensions. In other words, we are going further and further away from the spiritual source. But of course, it won't get to the time where it'll solidify because it's all going to decay. Now, where is the relevance of that in our discussion? Well, the relevance is that only a few days have gone from certain levels where this error occurred to now the final correction. So when people say, oh, why did God take so long, 16 billion years to fix it? He hasn't at all. That consciousness has been fixing it straight away. And at the level where the supreme consciousness is, there is no time. So it's almost as if it's an instantaneous correction. The craft I come from, the ratio is between 1.3 and 1.4 million to 1. In other words, for one day to pass on the craft, 1.4 million days have to pass on Earth. You see the relationship now? You see why it's ridiculous to think about how long it's been that we've been suffering and so on? Right. Now, the reason why they put us in these cardboard boxes, which is a trap, is to make us forget all these things and make us forget that we are interconnected consciousness. Have you heard of Bell's theorem of non-local causality? Where something that happens here can happen instantaneously millions of miles away and so on. When we're out of these bodies, when we're out of the physical dimension, we are actually totally connected so that there is no space and there's no time. We are our own units. But the evil system has destroyed that lattice and that's why we feel so different and separated. Now that its whole dissipating infrastructure is breaking down, we are starting to reconnect, and that's why we're getting our psychic abilities back. Does that make sense to you? So we eventually connect to what's going on and who we all are. So I've mentioned to you what's happening to the world. It's fragmenting. It's being allowed to destroy itself. The degree of dissatisfaction you see is because they can't get any energy from us anymore. There's no energy left for them. And that goes to madness. There's another reason for madness. In dreams and deep in the subconscious, everyone is picking up that this is the end. And the ones who are not viable, we all know whether we're viable or not. We all know from inside whether we're good beings or evil beings, right? The ones that are evil are fretting, and that's why you have so much madness in the world and so great a degree of suicide. Now, no one's ever mentioned that before, but that's filtering up into from the subconscious into the conscious mind, knowing they're finished. And as they realise that, they don't know anything else but self-destruct. And eventually the archons will do that too. They'll self-destruct and destroy this world along with it. But that's part of the plan that we're pursuing, and we don't mind. But also, this fragmentation is giving all the dishonesty. If you notice how people cheat far more, they cheat in front of your face. So they just can't help themselves. Before, at least, they tried to hide it. They were still liars and cheats, but they won't. And why these wars? They destroyed Libya, they destroyed Egypt, they destroyed everything. They're going to destroy Iran, Iraq, or they've destroyed Iraq, Syria, and then they're going to try and get China and Russia, because that's what demons do. They love war. They love to destroy things because they want the energy and the control. And by doing that, of course, they're going to destroy themselves. In the meantime, what's happening to you? Well, the first thing you've got to realise is you're awakening to all this, that something really nasty is happening. But you say, I don't want you to be any part of that. And that's where you start to get the implantation to prepare to get out of here, right? If you are viable, you're going to be extracted from here. And this spiritual survival is not automatic. Some have already been diagnosed as non-viable. They're finished. I'll tell you how many where humans are going to continue. I released a figure a while back on Jeff Rentz's show. Approximately 9% of the world's population is going to make it. About 650 million. Now, that doesn't sound a lot, but that's better than we thought would happen. Okay, so 9%. Now, as you start to awaken that this is finished, you shouldn't be affected at the panic of dying. Because as I said, you've died many times. You should, in fact, instill in yourself the joy of liberation. This is the end of all the pain, suffering, misery, and stupidity, BS, being mushrooms, and so on. So it's a whole new world waiting for us. If you've read anything about near-death experiences, for example, they don't want to come back, because even though they go into the astral levels for the moment, the conditions are so much better than they are here that they don't want to come back. The only time they're blackmailed into coming back is if they've got children or someone else to look after. And then they feel the heavy weight of responsibility, and they say, grudgingly, they come back to look after them. But if you ask them all, none of them want to come back, because this is hell in comparison to higher levels. And near-death experiences have been certified as valid by doctors, such as out-of-body experience and astral travel. And exclusively the information came from children, as young as 2, who cannot lie. And they bring back information of dead relatives that they never knew, or unborn children, their brothers and sisters who are going to be born later to their mother, and they talk about this, and this happens, and so on. So we know that that information is accurate. Now, a lot of the science are trying to say, boo-hoo, it's due to lack of oxygen or carbon dioxide accumulation and drugs. That is absolutely nonsense, because when they recover, these people have heightened psychic abilities, they have the loss of fear of death, and their brain works better than it ever worked before. If it was a mechanism for a dying brain, they'd have fried brains, they'd be mushrooms, they'd be vegetables, and they're not. So that shows you that it's a reality. Now, we'll talk a little bit about how this world came about. All existence is experimentation. I mean, once you're up there at another level, a higher level, you don't sit around playing the harp all day and praises to God and all that. That's all baloney for this demon god that's controlling this. He's dead, by the way, but he's been captured and neutralised, as I said in one of my essays on my website. And that's another reason why the whole apparatus is breaking down. Once he's gone, now that he's gone, the whole thing will collapse far more quickly. Now, so our work involves, at other levels, enjoying life, enjoying expression, and that includes experimenting with all sorts of things, doing wonderful things, which we have no idea about on this level, because we can't conceive that the degree of creativity. One of the experiments went bad. They tried to short circuit the negative aspect, which is needed for balance. This is as best as I can put it. Now, when that negative energy activated, it immediately developed an ego that was inimical to the ones that were doing the experiment. In other words, it contradicted them. And it decided to grab all the energy for itself and become the master of everything, which it couldn't do because it was only an experiment. But it had enough energy to entrap the whole dimension, and it precipitated into matter. You've heard the Big Bang Theory. That's exactly what happened. The energy it was able to seize precipitated into this form. It's very difficult for us to understand with our physical minds, but that's exactly what happened. This gives you two corollaries. Number one, that it's an evil essence that did that. It tried to break away from the godly essence. And number two, it started a process which therefore must have an end. So the universe has got to start. And if it's got to start, it must have an end. So what I'm saying is very scientifically based. Whether it's in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, or 20 million years' time, it's got a beginning and an end. It can't self-perpetuate. It can't go forever. The fact that when this being created, precipitated, closed himself off, and waited to get the energy from the beings trapped in it, by the time he did that, he sealed his own fate, because eventually it was going to run out of energy. So the plemora, the divine aspects, made it even faster by denying it further energy, and since that time it's been in a state of decay. And that is why time is now accelerating, because we're running out of energy and getting into lower and lower and lower solidified dimensions. Now, at the first start, they created beings with the energy it had that the mother was giving them. The mother expression is the energy that gives birth to things, right? It's just our human term. When it started stealing that energy and creating its own energy, it had a mixture of beings, and they are the robots, some of which responded to the light. Then it realised that it needed a far more vicious creation to control everything. So it created these demons, the demonic creation, the dark side, the archons that we have, and they are malicious and vicious. They have three basic characteristics on this level. They have lust for power, money, and sex. They can never be satisfied. That's what they go for. So they're bombing everyone they can to show what power they have. They steal everybody's money, like the financial collapses are all about stealing money from the middle and lower classes, you know, and going to the rich. And they're insatiable sex-wise. They're the three characteristics of demons. Now, since that time, they have controlled all this dimension, and they are the ones now that are being allowed to self-destruct. They have certain characteristics, and you will see them if you look into their eyes, if your psychic ability has reached that level. You will see reptilian eyes in them, and you'll see the demons, and if you're close enough, you're terrified of what you see. I've experienced that personally, even though I know them from their energy. But you will not make a mistake. Once you start seeing them, you won't make a mistake. And you'll be able to see them on television. You'll be able to see them in the movies. You'll be able to, most of the politicians on the top jobs are demons. They're reptiles. And this is, eventually we will all see them, and we'll all know who is who. We will know who are the good ones and who are the baddies. Now, as a corollary of that, we are all going to respond to the energies of others. And if you're of a good energy, there's no way you can mix with someone of a bad energy. You're going to just separate completely. And the baddies will go to the baddies, and they fight forevermore, and the good ones will go to their own. So if a nice person, a divine person is married to a demon, that marriage is doomed to fail. It will break. And now we've reached 60% of first marriages are breaking? Marriage has been a particularly good trap to exploit one or the other side, because they often pair off a good being who doesn't know he's a good being, he's unawakened, with a demon, and so on. That's going to stop, because people are going to wake up. let's go a little bit about, I've mentioned the plan of correction. You should have a reasonable idea of what's going on. If you, there was a philosopher called Leibniz about 300 years ago who said this is the best of all possible worlds. Again, part of the illusion of this crapitude of this place, the cultivated ignorance. All of us can think of a better place than this, surely, where everyone is fed, where everyone is happy, where there's no pain, there's no disease, there's no death. Therefore, by the fact that we can think of something better, this cannot possibly be the best of all possible worlds. So you see how they try to trick us into thinking that this is the best? No. So this allows you to know that when the New Agers say we are one, we are not one. There are different types. So I've already told you there are 3 different types of humans. There's the theomorphic ones, and there's only 5,000 of those left, as I said. There's the robotic, which make up 70% of the world's population. What's that? 4.9 million, a billion. And then there's 30% who are demons. We are not the same at all. Now, the fact that I have this information and give this information is the reason why you'll never read me in Nexus or New Dawn or any of the other things, because it contradicts exactly what they say. They don't want to hear this stuff. Why don't they want to hear this stuff? Because it's true. If this is true and they accept it as truth, all the other stuff they publish is rubbish, which it is. So eventually, though, everyone is going to accept what I'm saying because it's the only thing that is the truism of it. So just when people say, oh, we can prove that we are one, we are not one. The demons are one with their demon god. But now you understand that we are trapped here. There's a site called the prison planet. If you look at that, that's very accurate. This is not a classroom at all. You don't learn anything. Evil only teaches you how to be evil, to be dissatisfied and become more destructive and more evil. Besides, if it was a classroom, why the heck can't you remember what you learned in past lives? They say, oh, but the soul remembers. That's bullshit. What good is that? If you can't remember, it can't be a classroom because you come back and make the same mistakes again and again and again and again. There's a filtering mechanism. I'll explain now in a moment how the filtering mechanism works. So, as I said, some of you are going to react to this with disbelief. Some of you know that you know this already. Others of you are going to be doubtful and have to go away and think about it. All right, let's look at the question of who we are as individuals. We're obviously in a physical body, right? I call that the cardboard box. Okay, it's nicely made, it's got a genetic code, it's got a hormone system, an endocrine system, it's got muscles, nerves, heart, so on. But it's still a bloody robot, it's still a machine. It's still a cardboard box. And that's made to last for whatever it is, 90, 100 years, to contain and suppress the consciousness that's in it. If the consciousness is not in it, it dies. When I wrote this years ago, my books, I said that anyone without sleep for more than 14 days would die, because you need sleep to go to the prana stations to get energy for your vital systems. Stanford University denied that. They said that's impossible. So they did some experiments. After the 10th day, the experimenters they had were starting to get out-of-body experiences and were almost ready to die. And they realised, yes, you can't do without sleep. But they didn't give the metaphysical reason. The metaphysical reason is that we go to space stations in the etheric and astral world to get energy to keep connected to the body. It's getting warm in here. Now, so our body is run by the genetic code. It's already impregnated with a memory. With the endocrine system, it gives you hormones to eat, to sleep, to fornicate, to do everything, right? It's all in automatic code. You don't have to think. And that body, this body, responds to programming, pollution, and indoctrination. What do I mean by that? You are programmed in your mother's womb by her thoughts, her food, her smoking, her drinking, her genetic material. You are already programmed. It's like a dog that's, a bitch that has puppies and knows exactly what to do. To cut the cord, to eat the placenta and so on. That's just a reflex. We are born with those. The pollution, what is pollution? The pollution is the stuff we get from food, from drink, from sunlight, from air, from oxygen and so on, that tells the cardboard box how to act, how to stay alive, how to do things. It's automatic. We don't have to think about it. I mean, a baby is hungry and it cries for food. We get hungry, we go to the fridge, or we go shopping, we do this. It's automatic. We don't have to think about that. And if you're aware enough, you'll find that your body will tell you what you need to eat on a particular day. If you're more alert, you will ask your body, what do you want to eat today? And your body's attracted to different colours and different foods. Have you ever thought of that? Have you ever tried that? It's true. But this is still only the shell. And then it's indoctrinated from even before you're born. It's indoctrinated by what your mother reads and what the arguments it's having with her husband or partner, the troubles that are going on, and so on. It's indoctrinated when you go to school, depending on what school you go, a Catholic school, a Jewish school, and so on. And the indoctrination by peers, by pressure, by schooling, by university, and so on. So all these things affect the shell. And what it does, it's a prison for the consciousness, so you can't get to the consciousness. Because if you did, you'd know this information I'm talking about, and you would put an end to the emotional exploitation that occurs to you. It's an electrical cardboard box, right? It can't live without electricity. You all know you have an echocardiogram to see that's an electrical movement of the heart, how it works. You know the brain and spinal cord work via electricity and so on. Without those, we can't live. As well as those, we have, I'll just go a bit further. We have labels in the physical that describe the box. I mentioned those before. But they don't describe you. You're male and female, or black and white, you're educated or uneducated, you're rich or poor, you're, different things. But have a profession or don't have a profession. But these are all labels of the box. They are meaningless. As soon as the box dies, that's the end of it, right? So you see, those things that you value of the box are totally meaningless at a spiritual level. It's also got a lower mind that activates through the body and responds to this program of pollution and indoctrination that I mentioned. And you have another thing that's very evil, that's created and appears when little kids start at the age of 2 or so on, an ego. The ego is a mechanism that separates you from others. It is very evil because in our true existence, we are all interconnected. We are all in a lattice, as if we are one mind, we are one thing. There are different levels, of course, depending on where we come from and the degree of development, but we are one at that level. Whereas here, with ego, we are separate and distinct and in conflict with others. Now you see why ego is such a horrible, criminal thing. And they made bad mistakes in America with raising children at school, that you must nurture the ego. And you get all those little bastards now, they're uncontrollable. We see them here also. Is that not so? The ego is an evil mechanism. The first thing you want to do is get rid of the ego. Now, this lower mechanism also has a lower mind, as I mentioned, and it's been created on purpose by evil for evil. Do you realise that? Regardless of what consciousness you've got inside you, your body responds to evil. It's been made for evil. It wants to steal. It wants to lust. It wants better things. It wants to be better than others. It wants to suppress others. It wants, and so on. That is evil. You have to overcome that, and that's the personal war we're each involved in. It's also got what's called a filtering mechanism. By the way, I've written all these things in my books and websites if you're interested. It's got a filtering mechanism that prevents you knowing who you really are. It prevents you recalling memory of the past, or when you go astral travelling, or when you have in the etheric levels and that. Fleetingly you can get them, but then they dissipate because of this filtering mechanism. You don't remember your past lives because of this filtering mechanism. But it can be bypassed. You can meditate enough to learn that, you can reconnect to that, and as I said, as a clinical hypnotherapist, I can do that where people remember their past lives. It can be bypassed. As well as that, we have electrical bodies around this physical being. You remember there was a Russian that did some work on the aura, where you have emanations on a plate, or a photographic plate. Kirlian photography. Thank you. Now, we have an etheric body that can go into the etheric level. The etheric level is one level that vibrates slightly higher than this one. Then you've got the astral world that vibrates slightly higher than this one. And we also have an astral body that allows us to go there. It separates from the physical and can go to those planes. And people have come back. There's a Professor George Ritchie, a professor of psychiatry in Tennessee, who wrote about his near-death experience and where he went to these levels and expressed and explained all these things quite clearly. So they're not things I'm making up, by the way. He wrote his book long after I wrote mine. As well as that, we have an electromagnetic coat around us that's called the emotional body. You notice we're very emotional people. That responds to stimuli that come from outside of us. I'll give you an example. If you're standing next to someone that's really, really angry, you'll find, unless you're protected well, you will end up feeling angry. If you walk into a house, some of you may sense that this is a very happy house, or it's a very disturbed house. Have you ever come down? Or you drive a car or a taxi and you get the same experience. I like to think of one, if you ever go into a restaurant and you come out in a bad mood, if you're able to go around to the kitchen and see what sort of mood the cook is in, you'll find that if he's in a bad mood, he will have infected that food with these rings of awareness, I've called them, which they impinge on your emotional body and they affect you. All that is part of making you lose energy. The other one is if you get next to a lustful person, you'll start to get aroused because they're putting out that lust energy, those rings of awareness. And that's, of course, what prostitutes do and so on and so forth. Now, next to gamblers and other things. And you have discarnates in these areas as well, who are looking for that sort of excitement, and they will impinge on your aura and activate you that way, to gamble or have sex or do a crime of some sort or to take drugs and so on. This is the reality that no one's ever wanted to explain. And if you tell psychiatrists this, they think you're mad, but they're the mad ones because they're in complete ignorance of these things. I wrote a book about psychiatry and I got into trouble with the medical board. I told them the way they're treating practicing psychiatry is absolute rubbish, which it is. They never make anybody any better. They suppress them with drugs, of course. But the psychiatric treatment is spiritual. It's not with medications. And it's strange because Jung and William James, the fathers of psychiatry, came out with exactly the same explanation that I wrote about in my book. Anyway, that's the physical mechanism. You have the emotional body. Inside those things, you have the 7 centres of consciousness that I talked about. And those centres are seven centres. If you are a being that's been created by the God consciousness, has the blueprint of your existence. You know exactly who you are, where you're going, what you can do, what your capabilities are, and so on. You can explain everything once you awaken to it. That's why with me, once I got into this body and it was time to wake up, it was instantaneous. I knew everything that I needed to know because I contacted the blueprint. And you can do the same thing. Do you remember what Jesus said? What the things I can do, you can do and greater. That's because you're explaining to the true beings that they had the kingdom of heaven inside them. That's the blueprint, and that's the nous that the Gnostics talked about. By the way, if you look at, I said the Bible has got aspects of Gnostic wisdom in it. If you look at John 8:44, he confronts the Jewish leaders, and he says, "You are hypocrites, liars and murderers, as your father." So he called them demons, as if their father, the demon, and for that they killed him off. That's the mistake. Well, it was time for him to go anyway. But he's already told us that there are hypocrites and liars and murderers and demons who are exactly like their father, who created them. So he's explained the two creations to us, but people can't see that because they haven't got the knowledge within. And Zoroaster said the same thing, and Manichaeus said the same thing, and Muhammad said the same thing, and Buddha said the same thing, except that their writings and hearings have been altered. when Muhammad died, all his writings were seized, burnt, and they rewrote the whole thing, which is all the baloney that you get now that's causing so much trouble. But don't think they're the only ones that cause trouble. Look at the history of Christianity. I wrote a whole book on it, Death of an Evil God. Well, they went around killing and stealing for 20 centuries and no one's touched them. Now there's big kerfuffle about the degree of sexual misconduct that they're hiding. They are demons, people. They're run by demons, these institutions, and their end has come. That's why we now know all about this. So now this vital being inside us has got the higher mind. That is the divine mind within you, the droplet of God. That's what you're trying to access when you meditate. So, and you don't have to meditate by sitting down and trying to stay still and tell the kids to shut up and turn off the TV. You can meditate even driving, make sure it's a lonely road, or walking, or listening to music, or doing something repetitive, being in the garden and so on. You can go into an alpha state doing that. You don't have to sit there and get bored to death, or have to fight all these things. Now you know why the kingdom of heaven is within us. If we've got that little droplet, we have everything we need, and what you have to do now is awaken to that and get rid of all the other rubbish. Now, the lower mind, unfortunately, is what's called the monkey mind by the Sanskrit writers. That will always complain and always doubt and always give you confusion and want to put you on the wrong track. That's made by evil for evil, and wants to tell you that all this is nonsense. Now, usually the consciousness within is asleep, it's anaesthetised, it's drugged and fooled by this evil essence that we have around us. So this is what we have to awaken to. That's what we decided at the conference in '85, go down and tell them, wake them up, get their ones ready for evacuation, which we did in '99, 15 years later, and tell the rest what's going to happen to them. And for that, I'm not a popular man. But it's my job. And this is exactly what's going to happen. In 20 years' time, if we're still, there's not one person on the planet that's going to be able to argue with that, because that is a truism. Now, negative beings, or these demons, or the ones that failed, are blind to the light. They can't see the light. They don't know the truth, because they've never been exposed to the truth. Therefore, there's no chance that they can be viable, and there's no way they can live outside of this dimension. They can't live in the light. They're not of the light. That's why they can't see this truth. The ones the robots that I said that have made it have been declared viable are having alterations made to their vital being so that they will be able to exist, and they're going to pursue an evolutionary path away from the theomorphic beings, but they will still continue. And that's the 650 million. So I suppose we need to know what's going to happen to this earth. We'll come a little bit to that. I just want to mention a little bit about suffering, because we all suffer. The religions tell you, oh, it's good to suffer. The more you suffer, the more God loves you, and the higher place is heaven. That's bull dust. The more you suffer, the more you lose energy, the more you're in danger of self-destruction. You'll die, you'll spiritually die. So what did Buddha say? Detach, do not suffer. For goodness sake, don't lose energy, and that's what you do. So in your life, I'll come to this later on when I tell you what things you should do. Suffering is a means by which they get to our energy. The evil system is destroying us by making us suffer. So whenever you come across a mechanism that makes you suffer, put an end to it. Whether it's a spouse, whether it's a job, whether it's a situation, and so on. Now, if you get a particular illness that's going to make you suffer, detach from it so you won't lose energy. If it's going to kill you off, say, good, I've got my key to go home. I've got my ticket home. Don't let things make you suffer. The Catholics and the other Christians say, oh, suffering is great because God will reward you. That's bull dust. Now you see how evil they are. Suffering does nothing but weaken your spiritual body. So make sure you don't let anything make you suffer. How are we going for time? You all tired, exhausted?
You've got
Sleep? I'm doing my job, I love it. Okay, let's see how it's fragmented.
Do you want to have a 5 or 10 minute break?
I'll just go a bit more and then,
Okay.
then we'll have a break, yes, certainly. How is it breaking up? How is the fragmentation up? I told you the masses are awakening, right? One classical example is 9/11. Now, everyone outside America, and most inside America know that their own government did it as an excuse to carry on other wars. Now that's going to cause civil war. Now the government itself knows that. That's why FEMA's prepared so many camps and so many body bags and so on. But the masses are awakening and say, hey, these can't be our people. These aren't people that govern us. These are different. These are bastards. These are demons. And that's how the awakening is going to happen. The second one is the Holocaust. That's the biggest trick they've ever pulled on anybody. Absolutely nothing of that happened. The whole 6 million, no 6 million ever died. I gave the exact figure because I know the exact figure and it's on my website. If I'm happy for you to go and look at it. It's 123,132 died during those 5 years, Jewish people, and most of them died from natural causes. You must read a book called The Holocaust Hoax by Victor Thorne. It's also on my website. It explains everything. That is a massive trick to emotionally blackmail us and keep us suppressed. So these Zionists and Archons can do exactly what they like around the world, and they have. So these lies are coming out. The next one is going to be the Bible. What a huge lie that is. And the Catholic Church. I mean, it's self-destructing now, isn't it? By trying to hide all the evil it's done. They've rewritten truth. Now, before this era, whenever anyone came out with this knowledge, they'd be destroyed. This happened to all the Gnostics. Obviously, you can tell I've got the Gnostic knowledge. The Bogomils, Cathars, all the other ones, everywhere. They chased them, hunted them down and destroyed them, burned them at the stake. So other things are what are going to happen to this. Now, with the financial collapses, they're planning another one again to destroy people. And eventually people are going to realise, they are realising now, that those in control are doing it on purpose to gain their wealth. And they've done this all along. 1929, before that, in the 80s and the 60s, they always do that to gather the wealth for themselves. They're quite evil. They'll continue the wars. And they've also got an eugenics program to kill off, I don't know if you've heard, 6 billion of us,
Yeah.
because they want the planet for themselves. But of course, they're going to be overrun by the total plan that I've exposed to you. And they've done this in a very sly way. They began the eugenics program in the 1920s in Germany, funded by the Zionists, the Rothschilds. And later on they became the Nazis, of course. But the Nazis and the Zionists are exactly the same thing. This is why you must read history carefully. They try to tell you they're different things and confuse you, but they're exactly the same essence, same energy, same demonic energy. They've done it with fluoridation. Remember they said fluoride is good for your teeth, huh? All the places that had fluoride have got worse teeth than the ones that haven't. That's partly to kill off our brains, and it's also carcinogenic. Research those things. You've got HAARP, you know, the one that causes tsunamis and earthquakes? Fukushima was due to HAARP technology to destroy Japan. They've got drugs galore. They sponsor drugs. There's no war on drugs. The war of drugs is to make you have more drugs, if you look into it. Chemtrails are very important. I was the only doctor in Australia to diagnose a Morgellons disease in a patient. Read it up. You'll know what they're doing. Apart from everything else, they're cutting the B12 levels that will cause dementia in people. Apart from that, they give a disease called Morgellons, which is very, very severe. You know about genetically modified foodstuffs? They're killing nations with it. If you go onto YouTube and see what Monsanto is doing to various countries, you'd pull your hair out. And they're doing it legally. These are the evil archons that control the world. They're destroying the rest of us. But while they do that, they're going to destroy themselves. And the weather patterns are due to this HAARP, and the poverty they're doing is manipulated. I've mentioned the dishonesty everywhere, the pollution of air, water and soil, the new viruses, all the viruses. This year I refused to have the flu shot because I know that they're military agents to make people sicker. And this year I didn't get the flu. Every other year I did. Frontline medical people and nurses, the first ones they force you to have. And this year I said no. because they are mechanisms that are going to eventually kill us off.
There's also a nanochip in them. Yeah.
That's right, they can do those, especially the vaccines.
Wherever you are at any given time. Yeah.
So you can read all these things. You've got Agenda 21, the Club of Rome with their finances and so on. All these things are coming to the fore now. Extremely low frequency waves that can cause madness, the microwaves and so on. You can go by, your phone itself can cause dementia. It can disturb the brain. So always use the speaker, don't put it close to your head. These economic wars that they're crying about, they're all going to happen. They're killing off people at will. And this is what the New World Order is about. All right, we'll have a short break there and then we'll come back and talk about other things and answer your questions. As you see there, I've written that there are three realities contemporaneously that we're living in. The first one I've called the prosaic reality. That is your little robots, unawakened little robots. They think that history is accurate. They believe everything that's in the media and the Courier Mail. They watch the news and they swallow that, hook, line and sinker. They don't question anything. They think whatever the doctor tells them is fine. They don't read anything outside of the ordinary. They don't believe in UFOs. They don't never thought of reincarnation. They believe exactly what their religion tells them, that they're good, they'll go to heaven, they're bad, they'll go to hell and so on. Don't think twice about tithing 9% or whatever it is, and they're just idiots. They're the lowest common denominator. They're cannon fodder. Some of them will awaken. As I said, 11% of those will awaken to make up the 650 million. The second one is the esoteric reality. That's where most of us are at the moment. We know there's something more than is being shown to us, right? We believe in UFOs. We have contact at other levels and dimensions. We have readings. We can do tarot readings. We have intuition. We have dreams. We have had out-of-body experiences. We've regressed to past lives. We understand other things, other worlds, other UFOs. Many of us have regressed to coming from another planet. Our origin, we're aware of all these things, and we know that it's more than the sum of the parts that are presented to us. For example, we know about 9/11, about the Holocaust, about the cause of wars, the First World War, the Second World War, why there's financial crises and so on. And as we read more and more, we know these things. They're no longer conspiracies. We know about HAARP. We know about chemtrails. We see them. We know people with more gallons. We know B12 deficiency is being caused by this. We know that the sun is decaying because we've read about it. Even the scientists admit that isotopes are no longer have a constant periodicity. We know that we're all running out of vitamin D. Make sure you get your vitamin D checked, regardless of your age. Most people are running out of it. And it's got not just bone to do with bone metabolism, but also it can cause diabetes, heart problems and dementia. Dementia is going to be a very big problem shortly because of the electromagnetic radiation we're getting, the chemtrails and the fluoridation that's constant, and other things we're suffering. So that's the esoteric reality. We know that there's something more and we're connecting to it. What are we connecting to it? We're connecting to the third one, the supramental consciousness. If you've read anything about the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche of 2 centuries ago, well, he died last century, 112 years ago, he wrote about the development of the superhuman, the Superman. Now, it's in esoteric style, and he meant more in a spiritual sense, and he was the one that said God is dead. Exactly the same thing as I'm saying to you that Jehovah is dead. He was one of the avatars. And in fact, when he was buried in the church, the Christian church called him a demon, where in actual fact he was the very opposite. He was an aspect of God. But most people don't understand his writings, and he wrote in an esoteric form. And before he died, he did write in a letter to his sister that he was the crucified one. That is, he was an aspect of Christ, reincarnated. Now, he mentioned about the superhuman, and then a chap called Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo, last century also. He was an English-educated philosopher who wrote about the descent of the supramental consciousness, the descent of the God consciousness into humans for this change that's going to occur. And he said, once we awaken to that, we'll return to the life divine. And this is exactly what you are awakening to. We are now going to a supramental consciousness
where we know all about this evil and its tricks, and we're extricating ourselves, and mentally we are going to live as divine beings already on the planet in this supramental phase, beyond simply the esoteric one, the hidden one, because we know even the truth about that. That is part of the virtual reality. The esoteric is still part of the virtual reality. The astral and etheric planes are still part of the virtual reality. And if you've read anything about spiritual philosophers, they say this world is an illusion, don't they? It's an illusion because it's not real. It's not who we really are. It's just a front. It's a prison planet for exploitation of energy, and we're living in these bodies which aren't really us, but they pretend that they're us, and they're not. That's why they say this is an illusion, and it must eventually pass. Now, what mechanisms are going to occur that will destroy this place? Well, they're in motion now. You see the wars they're running. Next, they'll attack Syria, then Iran for sure, nuclear weaponry. China will join in, Russia will join in. They've already said they will. India, Pakistan, and so on. And that'll cause the death of at least a third of the planet. Meteors are becoming rogue. Scientists are picking them up more and more now. All calamities were supposed to occur slowly, but if they don't, if they're delayed, they're going to all occur at once. The magnetic pole has been shifting for quite a while, but that's neither here nor there. It'll only disturb pigeons on their way home. But the place will fall on its axis. The planet will fall on its axis, mainly due to the alignment that occurs every 25,600 years or so, as you've read in the main long calendar. And that will cause many disturbances. In ancient texts, it's known as the Great Flood. That occurs in all cultures around the world, and of course it's in the Bible as the story of Noah. But it occurs everywhere. And when that happens, the tectonic plates shift, you get massive tsunamis and drown just about everybody. The thing we were told is to be at least 1,000 feet up. If you're on the coast, it's goodbye. So make plans if you can to move up. That's if you need to survive. Other things, apart from the comet strike, the nuclear winter, those things, and the whole thing can fragment. Of course, there's also this the principle of entropy, wherein the whole thing will shrink down. There's a possibility that if they fire enough nuclear weapons, they'll ignite the atmosphere and we'll all go in a few seconds. The sun can also burst, and we'll have 8 minutes. Well, we won't have 8 minutes, we'll have about 3 minutes, because once it gets close enough, we'll all fry. They've blown planets up before, these archons. Vulcan was one of them, which is now the asteroid belt. So these things are reality. The only difference now is that the whole dimension is going. The rest of the physical universe is going to go. And as the other places go, we'll see stars falling out of the sky or disappearing. That's in books, right? The talk of the revelations of St. John in the Bible is nearly all Gnostic doctrine, although it's been rewritten quite a few times for people who didn't know what they were talking about. So all these things come into fruition, like Mother Shipton, Nostradamus, St. Malachy. It's interesting if you read St. Malachy that he predicted the popes, each pope until the end time. And the last one was going to be Peter of Rome. That's the one after this one. In fact, it's been found that was an interpolation. It wasn't him at all. So the last one is the one we've got now. So all the disasters are going to probably occur during his. And I've given you the other timing. But look, they're not important, people. They're just mechanisms by which we can be liberated out of the physical and go home. I wanted to mention just sort of a few points of what you can do from now on that will assist you in these end times, so that you'll minimise your suffering. First of all, you're going to awaken. As you awaken, you've got to realise that there is evil around the world. There are evil people. There are people that are dishonest and trying to hurt you. So you have to know how to protect. There's ways of protecting. If you read my books, you'll know. You put an envelope around you so that you won't lose energy. They can't attack you. They can't invade your aura. For goodness sake, don't use drugs or get drunk or have sex with demons or evil people, if you know who they are. Better still, just stay to yourself until you learn who's who. You will get psychically attacked. That's another reason why you must protect. You've all experienced that. I don't have to go through it. I'm sure you know all about that. And there's a thought pool around the world. Carl Jung, the psychologist, sort of hinted at it when he said universal unconscious. Now, that thought pool has all the thoughts that all the people express. And generally speaking, it's negative. It's always negative. So the more people get depressed, agitated, anxious, suicidal, the more those thoughts are going to impinge on you. And you'll feel down and down and down as the world drowns in misery. So it's important to protect yourself from that. And there are a number of mechanisms by which you can do that. Now, I wrote an essay called Terminal Madness. Eventually people are just going to go completely mad for a number of reasons. Some of them I've already mentioned. Make sure you're not one of those, okay? You must purify your body as much as you can. I advocate, first of all, vegetarianism, so you won't get the poisons that the animals have been poisoned, and also you'll be sparing the death of animals. No drugs, no drink. Learn the other factors of programming, pollution and indoctrination. They're in my book. I haven't got time to go through them now. You're going to go this purification process. Isolate from people that will do you damage and from situations that will do you damage. You have to be strong. You have to recognise. It might be a spouse, it might be a family member, it might be a relative, it might be your work associates, anything. If you find that you're in a place where you're being damaged, get out of there, isolate. You have to find the strength, okay? It's for your spiritual survival. Well, the decision has been made whether you survive or not, but it's the amount of suffering you're going to undergo till the end. Meditate if you can. That will contact your higher centres and open up your higher mind, which will feed you the information. Already 2 of the people in the audience have told me that they know this stuff. It resonates within. It's instantly awakened them. That is, they've got the now. So what I've said is accurate. Listen to good music. Beethoven, Haydn, Mozart, and so on were avatars. They were specifically sent down at that group to create the music they have. And if you look at some studies, they say that listening to Mozart actually increases your IQ. Plants do better with it, animals do better, and so on. So get into that habit. Even if you don't understand the music, just let that energy filter through your body. Realise that this is the final time. I'm not kidding. I'm not trying to waste your time. I'm not trying to con you out of anything. I've been sent down here to tell you this is it. This is the final time. So you have to understand that and dissociate from that which is not important and concentrate on what is important. In other words, start living in the supramental plane. And some people have already impinged onto the new dimension. I've had people sending me emails that they're already experiencing that new life. You can do that also. Dissolve any dark emotions in you, particularly anger and rancor. Don't buy into arguments. Don't lose your energy. Just say, look, it's not worth it. I've done it before. It's got me nowhere. I just feel exhausted after it. Don't buy into a fight, okay? You should live, as Babaji always said, who's a special friend of mine, live in peace, harmony and love and simplicity. Simplify your life. Just look for a peaceful situation. Live in true love, not emotional love. I'll just spend a moment on that. Emotional love is a biological system that depends on antigen-antibody. Did you know that? Often when you kiss and exchange saliva, those things bind, and if you're different enough, you'll fall in love with the person. Usually it's male and female, but it can be other in these days. And that's because the consciousness within a male may be a female, and therefore that female consciousness wants to go with a male. It's a bit complicated, but it's got nothing to do with sin. It's just another screw up by the evil system. Now, that emotional love is there for you to copulate and make kids. As soon as you've done that, after a certain while, it dissipates. And once that love is gone, you say, why the hell did I marry him or her? What was I thinking? What was I drinking? And so on. It's an artificial love. And it's only there for sex, possessiveness, and self-satisfaction. And it's always shadowed by the fear of loss. That's how you know it's emotional love. True love is a love we express to people who are our own family, who are of like mind and like energy. There's no lust about it, there's no possessiveness, there's no rancor, there's no wanting to have sex and so on. It is the pure unemotional love. And that is the love you express when you follow the Akkadian golden rule. That is, do unto others as you would have done to you. you don't express that emotional love. We are beings of love. When we go back, it's the universal love that we are immersed in, not the sexual, emotional, evil love. And there's a saying in Latin, once life finishes, love continues. And that's exactly what's going on. Physical life continues, but the love and loving beings will continue. Now, you have to come to the realisation that you are not just a cardboard box. The cardboard box is going to break down and at some stage let you down and die off. Whoopee, that's got nothing to do with you. The quicker you're out of it, the better it is anyway. And some people will come to the realisation, and they have to come to that they're no longer viable. And they've only got themselves to blame. Now, if this happens to someone you know, your family, relatives and so on, pets, just realise they've had umpteen chances, as many chances as anyone else, to turn to the light. It's been their choice to remain in the darkness, okay? You are not going to be emotionally blackmailed by that. Learn to recognise the reptiles and demons around you. This is important, and you will see them. A lot of people have emailed me saying, you're right, I'm starting to see them. And you might see them in a flash. You know, you stopped at the light, you look at the next car next to you, and you'll see a reptile instead of the human. That's a sign that your psychic ability is waking up. If you have demonic relatives, you know what to do. You respect them, but you don't get involved, okay? You don't let them steal your money or your energy or have sex with them and so on. You have to realise what family you belong in, who your family truly is. It's got nothing to do with emotional or genealogical issues. It's more to do what the energy is. Your family is the divine energy that shares the universal love. Until the final day, I ask people to respect all laws, no matter how stupid they seem to be, okay? Fulfill all your social obligations. Don't renege on those. Look after your kids, your spouses, your grandparents, your parents, whoever it is. You must fulfill those. Now, this is one of the things I didn't like about David Icke. He was saying to rebel, don't pay your taxes, don't do that. He's asking for people to become criminals and they'll get punished even all the more. That is not right, okay? You continue to remain as physically strong and fit as possible. That way you will suffer less. So do the right thing, have the right diet, exercise, eat the right food, the drink, attend to any maladies and so on. You don't just despair. Because if you're sick all the time and that, you can't be of any help to any others. And while you're nice and strong, of course you can help a lot of others, including your pets. A lot of them are going to be viable beings. And you have to look after them in all ways possible, okay? Make sure your diet is good, and for goodness sake, don't take drugs. You can take a medicinal amount of alcohol, particularly red wine. A glass of red wine is great for the heart and brain. But don't go crazy. 2 on a Saturday for you. But any more than that is going to do you damage, okay? Get an interest in your body and see what's good for it and what's not good for it. Even as a doctor, I'm telling you, pharmaceutical drugs are not always the best thing to take. And then, of course, in your quiet moments, if you've done the right thing, you'll start to separate from the troubles of the world. They'll just slip away from you. You'll find a little niche inside you, a little vacuum where everything is fine. You'll live in that little kingdom inside you, and it's not going to worry what's happened. You're not going to lose energy through pity or compassion or other things. You know these things are coming. You're not going to feel sorry for those people. They've had infinite chances to do the right thing. And besides, it's their way of going home. I live in a little country town and there's always roadkill on the roads, you know, kangaroos, cats, dogs. And I don't feel sorry for them. I say that was their chance to go home. So I tell them if they're still hanging around, they often are, when they're traumatically killed, their subtle bodies are still there, so follow the light and go home. And they pick that up and they will do that. So get into the habit of saying that, and that will help them. Even humans. Being a doctor, I'm in a special position where people are dying. I often ask them if they're having bedside visitations, relatives coming to prepare them. If they say yes, well and good, they're ready to go home. If it's not, I explain to them what's happening, and it's amazing how when they lose their fear of death, it becomes a great experience, okay? And just finally realised that the process I've mentioned of total universal destruction is on automatic pilot. It can't be stopped. Okay? We don't want it to be stopped. We want this prison totally destroyed, and we all want to go home.